In this lesson, I'm going to be talking about gerundives. Now, gerundives show up in several different languages. Specifically in Latin, they are very unique. They're pretty easy to pick out, and they have a very specific way of being translated. Now, with gerundives, it's a verb form, and in thinking about gerundives, we need to think about, okay, when would we actually use these things? Gerundives are used to show obligation or necessity. And in thinking about real life situations, I mean, there's tons of situations where we could tell anyone that they must do something. Looking at these characters on the screen, okay, you could say, Cerberus, you must eat more food because I can see your rib cage. Grumio, you must get some sleep so you don't get fired for sleeping on the job, so on and so forth. So with gerundives, we are going to be using them to show obligation or necessity. They look very unique. The verb form, whatever the character must be doing, is always going to end in an ndum est. Now, easy way to remember that, you can see there's an nd in ndum est, and there's also an nd in gerundive. Okay, so nd in the name, nd in the ending. That's an easy way to remember that. Another unique part of gerundives, the subject is always in the dative case. Now, if you think about what case is the subject normally in a normal Latin sentence? I'm praying to God that you said the nominative case. You guys have been learning that since stage 1. Whereas with gerundives, the subject is actually going to be in the dative case, and I'll explain why in a few moments. As I said before, gerundives are always going to be translated must. Okay, must, because we're showing obligation or necessity. Let's look at some example sentences. So if you look at these 4 sentences on the left side of the screen, you can see that in each one of them we have the ndum est. Okay, mihi ambulandum est, tibi currendum est, novus coquendum est, hostis novus interficiendum est. You can see you have that endum est in each one of those, so we know that we're working with gerundives. We also see that the subject, the first word of each sentence, mihi, tibi, novus, and another novus over here, those are all in the dative case. Now this might take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you identify the ndum and the form of the verb to be, you're always going to look for that subject in the dative case. Now the reason why they use the dative case, it's a little bit complicated. I won't go into too much depth, but the fancy term for gerundive is the future passive periphrastic. Now you can probably see why I call it gerundive versus that. It's way easier to say and it's less intimidating for you. The literal translation of mihi ambulandum est would be, it is for me to be walked. Okay, mihi, it is for me ambulandum est, to be walked. Now that doesn't really make too much sense for us, so a more general translation of mihi ambulandum est is going to be I must walk. Okay, it is for me to be walked, or I must walk. I think it's pretty obvious what choice you should choose. Now looking at the next one, okay, tibi currendum est. Again, we're going to start with the dative subject. Tibi is going to be translated you, and currendum est is going to be must run. Now what I'd like you to do is take a few moments, pause this video, and try the next 2 on your own. Okay, and then you can press play and I'll explain the answer. So take a moment, pause this video right now, and try the next 2 on your own. Okay, so hopefully for the next one you saw novus is going to be the dative form of we. So we must, because of the ndum est, and the verb means cook. So we must cook. The very last one's a little bit tricky. you can see that there are two words in front of the gerundive here, the interficendum est. Be careful. Even if there are two words in front of that gerundive, you need to look for the dative word and translate that first. Okay, even though hostis is in the nominative, we want to do novus first. So hopefully you said, we must kill the enemy. Okay, so again, novus is in the dative. Hostis is going to be in the nominative, but we're still going to translate that last. So really important that you know your case endings. Purpose of the gerundive. Okay, you can see that we already have forms of verbs that show obligation. You guys have seen a ton of necesse est mihi ambulare. It is necessary for me to walk. Pretty similar to mihi ambulandum est, I must walk. But there's a certain amount of urgency and seriousness that goes into saying must do something versus it is necessary. So although it shows a similar amount of obligation, the gerundive form is a little bit stronger in its emphasis. So again, you can see tibi currendum est, you must run, and necesse est tibi currere, it is necessary for you to run. Very similar sentence structures. Okay, they essentially mean the same thing, but it just gives a little bit of variety in how you can write the language and what you'll see in actual context. So just to recap, gerundives are a form of verb that shows obligation or necessity. The verb will always end in ndum est, which remember the nd is just like the nd in the word gerundive, so make that connection. The subject is always going to be in the dative case, and you can see the red dative case words down below that you might see pretty often. Mihi, tibi, ei, so I, you, he, she, or it. Nobis, vobis, eis, we, y'all, and they. And finally, the translation, you must translate it must. Okay, translate it must. It's pretty easy to remember that. Now, remember, having talked about gerundives here in this lesson, you can always rewind, pause, fast forward, and watch this video as many times as you need. Feel free to take notes and come back whenever you need extra help. Thanks for listening.